Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back from another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have U.S. to tell partners they must pick sides in AI race with China, in parentheses state capitalism, posted by Woke Boogeyman, and that looks like an article from Reuters. And yeah, personally, I think the Libertarian position is, if you want to pick side, whoever you want to side with in the AI race, you should be able to. It should be personal choice what side you want to side with, rather than the state pushing you to side with one side over the other. And that's my thoughts there. Next, we have AP exclusive. U.S. military-based schools put new emphasis on Western civilization and Christianity, posted by Swamp Yankee Dan, and that's a cross post from the Moderate Politics subreddit, and that looks like an article from AP News. Yeah, personally, I think libertarian position is, this is a good reason why we should have the state out of education, because they can ultimately bias it however they feel like. Of course, Reddit's not going to care if it's about Western civilization, Christianity. I'm sure if it was up to them, it'd all just be woke transgenderism being taught in the schools. But, ultimately, I think the libertarian position is, the idea of the school is going to be inherently subject to the discretion of who's ever running it. So if you don't like the current government, ultimately that's why you should argue the governments that should be out of schools rather than having the government control them. Of course, Reddit, they're not really principled. They're completely fine with having the government run schools as long as as long as the government's seen as progressive by their standards. And it just goes to show you these people have no principles, only teams. They'll be completely fine if every government run schools as long as they push the correct woke narratives. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have the K-shaped economy in 2026, posted by Woke Boogeyman, and that looks like an article from U.S. Bank. Explore the K-shaped economy in 2026, how uneven resilience across households and industries is shaping growth, inflation, and financial risk. And it says the term K-shaped economy emerged during the COVID-19 pandemic to describe a diverging recovery where some segments of society and industry can rebound quickly while others lagged. The K-shape reflects the bifurcated path. High-income households and capital-intensive sectors benefit from asset appreciation and technological change, while lower-wage workers and labor-intensive sectors face more limited income growth and thinner financial buffers. Today, the K-shaped economy is better understood as a structural pattern of uneven resilience, one that includes influence as the growth is distributed, how shocks are absorbed, and how risks emerge across the economy. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is that's how the economy should naturally be. Some sectors might not always be doing as well as other sectors, but that's very much how economics works. Ultimately, it's going to come down to what people need at any given second, and that's very much what economics should be, I would say. Next, we have Blanche declines to pledge independence from the White House. Attorney General Todd Blanche on Sunday declined to commit to always acting independently of the White House, a concern among critics who worry the Justice Department is carrying out President Donald Trump's political agenda, posted by Swamp Yankee Dan, and that's a cross post from the Law subreddit, and that looks like an article from CNN. And yeah, personally, I don't think it really matters in the long run. The Justice Department is ultimately just going to be purview to who's ever running it. And I personally think libertarian positions, you got to get rid of the Justice Department. We survived for decades, pretty much the first whole century without a Justice Department. And isn't that what's supposed to be the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court's for? I don't think the U.S. needs its own Justice Department. You should be gutting that along with for pretty much every other cabinet department. Pretty much everyone, you could argue everyone that wasn't there at the beginning you don't need to have. And maybe, and even then, even ones that, the older ones, you have a lot of agencies on them you don't need either, but it doesn't really matter because the government only grows regardless of which branch of the Union Party's in power. We're probably overdue for another cabinet department to be added soon. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Flock Safety's new privacy rules do little to ease concerns over ALPR surveillance from Reason.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is, ultimately, if they want to set up whatever cameras they want to set up, they can justify that. But ultimately, I don't like how it's government backed. Ideally, it should be private backed. But in reality, I would say we shouldn't have any public cameras at all. But ultimately, they can put cameras wherever they feel like, and oftentimes, there's not much you can do about it since they're in a position of state authority. If they were in a position of state authority, you could justify taking them down, but then you'd have to deal with their corporate authority as well, which wouldn't be too good either. So ultimately, I don't think you should have public cameras monitoring every action, but ultimately, if they have the ability to justify doing that, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next we have Thinking of Writing, a U.S. history book divided into 5 parts. These are their names, posted by Far Chemical 707, and they said Part 1, Don't Tread on Me, 1776 to 1820. Part 2, A House Divided, 1820 to 1865. Part 3, Across the World, 1865 to 1913. Part 4, Nothing to Fear but Fear Itself, 1913 to 1971. Part 5, I Did Not Have Sexual Relations with, and that's crossed out, and then he wrote Scanner Darkly, 1971 to present. The first 4 get their names from political speeches or one case of flag. Then Part 5 breaks the pattern by being named after a 1977 novel and 2006 movie about the war on drugs and surveillance state. I didn't like breaking the pattern, but it was too fitting a name to pass up. Other contenders included Crisis of Conscience, Carter, Morning Again in America, Reagan, A Bridge to the 21st Century, Clinton, and The End of History, Fukuyama. I'll admit the last one would have been hilarious as the final chapter of a history book. The unusual choice of 1913 and 1971 as breakpoints, plus the Cross of World reference, should indicate this book would have an enormously heavy focus on economic and monetary policy. 1820 was chosen because that was the year of the Missouri Compromise, the transition point where our national focus stopped being about proving ourselves to the old world powers and was directed westward since the problems caused by the expansion of slavery, and because 1820 is exactly halfway between 1776 and 1865. I also considered a three-part structure in which the Civil War and the end of World War II would be the dividing lines. Feedback would be appreciated. And yeah, personally, that sounds interesting. I personally would view U.S. history as being more divided into 3 parts than 5. You got the Revolution to the Civil War. That's like that. I call that part the American Republic. Then you got the Civil War to World War II. That's the transition from Republic to Empire. And you got World War II to present. That's the American Empire. And personally, ultimately, I think people should be able to divide history however they want to, though. But I definitely do think those are. If I had to divide into parts, I definitely divide into those 3 parts. And yeah, I hope they do. If they do end up writing their book, I hope it does well. And that's my thoughts there. And then I don't know if there's anything new, but I wanted to share a post I made to the Autism Politics subreddit. I said this was about the Jason Arday drama, and I said, what can we learn from the Jason Arday saga? And I said, Arday, a black and autistic sociology professor, recently committed suicide after being ousted by the University of Cambridge for plagiarism. Is one of the biggest stories of the last couple of weeks. A lot of people have been quick to blame media dogpiling for suicide, but I would argue the biggest one to blame is Arday himself. Just because someone is part of groups that are historically stigmatized, and it doesn't mean they should be held to lower standard than other people, and that's what I see a lot of progressives doing in regards to Arday. They infantilize him and take away any agency of his and blame the system rather than acknowledging that he should have taken responsibility for his own actions. And then I said, I added in the comments, he took the easy way off anything. Just because the media is mean to you doesn't mean you need to offer yourself. Otherwise, Trump would have killed himself several times over by now. And yeah, personally, just to go show you that, people, when someone's marketed more in the in-group rather than the out-group, people will blame, the other factors for their decline and fall from grace. But when it's literally in the out group, Reddit will say, oh, they should, it's their fault. And just to show you, people will never have to hold their own side responsible. So it will always be other factors that are at play. Well, on the other side, they're always going to be completely responsible for their own actions. And I think that's just another example of how people are going to be inherently have team-based thinking rather than principled thinking. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So, let's see if there's anything new. I think that's going to be... Yeah, it looks like there's nothing new. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.